गणेशाय नमः। सरस्वत्यै नमः। श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ओम्। सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
My loving pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet, respected director, esteemed colleagues, and dear students. It gives me great pleasure in welcoming you all to the English Debate Competition 2019-20. Before I read out the rules for the competition and launch the competition, I would like to invite the two teams from the Arjunas and the Bharatas. As I call out their names, they may offer pranams to Bhagwan and let the Arjunas occupy their seats left to the chair and the Bharatas right to the chair. From the Arjuna house, we have Sai Govinda, Nikhilesh Pandey, Sai Sriram, Sai Ritvik, and Satya Sai Aditya. From the Bharata house, we have Manav, Bibhu Prada, Achyut Murari, Raghav Ahuja, and Ritvik Pandey. Now for the rules. Each participant is allotted a maximum of 4.5 minutes, 3.5 plus 1 minute to wind up the argument. And all participants are requested to address the other house rather than addressing the individual or pointing at the individual. All clarification to be addressed to the chair, and the order of the chair is binding. This is about the rules. And about the jury, today we have Mr. Sriram with us as the jury. He is an alumni of our institute. Please welcome Mr. Sriram. Then we have from the Department of Chemistry, Dr. Shantanu Roy, and from the Department of English, on the jury we have Dr. Arun Behera. One more thing I forgot to announce. Today, Vaibhav is going to be our timekeeper. Today is going to be a case, the age-old case of nature versus nurture. And to my right are the Arjunas, and to my left are the Bharatas. And the Bharatas believe that by nature, man is either good or bad. Nothing can be done about it. And for them, a wolf is a wolf. A wolf remains a wolf, and therefore it has to be shot. Am I right? And for the Arjunas, they believe that man is not good or bad by nature. Man acquires goodness or badness when he comes into the world, when he experiences the world. Due to various experiences, he becomes either good or bad. And therefore, if bad is acquired in the world, it can also be given up through training. So therefore, what the Arjunas believe is that all capital punishment should be abolished. And therefore, the Arjunas today move the motion, and their statement obviously is capital punishment or death penalty should be abolished. And without taking any of your time, I will now invite the first speaker from the House of Arjunas to move the motion, Sai Govinda.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Om Shri Sai Ram. We, the Arjunas, offer our most humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Respected Director, Honorable Chair, esteemed panel of jury, teachers and my dear brothers, a very loving Sai Ram and good morning to all of you. When we found ourselves on this side of the debate, arguing that capital punishment or the death penalty should be abolished, we were like, why on earth should it be abolished? I mean, it makes sense, right? But when we looked into research and literature, went through opinion and fact of the jurists, human rights activists and criminologists, we were more than convinced that capital punishment should be abolished. Because A, is taking another life a just and moral punishment or an act just as barbaric as the crime that triggered it in the first place? B, does such an irregular and inconsistent punishment, irreversible in its effects, deserve a place in the growing standards of decency that mark the evolution of a more humane and decent society? Currently, the world is witnessing a change with 140 countries having abolished the capital punishment. And according to Amnesty International, the world's leading human rights organization, there was a fall of about 31% in the number of capital punishments, which is the greatest in at least a decade. This proves that even the most unlikely countries are moving towards the abolition of capital punishment, and they have realized that it's of no use. Cruel in its operation, ineffectual as a preventer of crime, as a deterrent, liable like any other punishment to be error-prone, uneven in its application in an uneven society. All of these are grievous flaws that are intrinsic to the nature of capital punishment, and all this is augmented by the fact that it simply makes the society more bloodthirsty. Dear brothers, if you look at the US alone, 19 states have abolished the capital punishment, And according to a very interesting fact from a paper in the Stanford Law Review, in the states which had capital punishment, they actually witnessed a rise in the crime rates from 1990 to 2015. Seems counterintuitive, right? Well, there are reasons for this, and they'll be explained to you by my other teammates. Do you also know that 10th of October every year is celebrated as the World Day Against the Capital Punishment? Now, you might be thinking as to why so many countries are moving towards the abolition of capital punishment. Well, there are very important reasons, and I'll explain it to you through the example of India, the country we know best. First, the principal claim that it actually deters crime. Innumerable studies have proven that capital punishment actually does not serve the purpose that its advocates claim it does. B. Delivering a verdict on capital punishment is highly arbitrary, subjective, and is far from consistent. For example, a person is convicted in the trial court. In the High Court, he is acquitted of all charges. Then again in the Supreme Court, he is convicted and given a death sentence. Today, you have a president who rejects certain mercy petitions. Tomorrow, you have someone who accepts. If justice was supposed to be fair, standard, and unbiased, then let me tell you that capital punishment is far, far, far away from meeting any of these parameters. Now, talking about the thoughts that might be ringing in all of your minds, that the recent incidents in India, especially of assault, have triggered demands that capital punishment should be given to the perpetrators of such crimes. Well, while we recognize the fact that to try and explain to the victims of such acts of gross injustice is not only futile, but also highly disrespectful given their situation, but by executing the criminal, no doubt you're providing a sense of justice to the family and the society at large. However, you are deterring the public from asking fundamental questions like 1, why did this crime happen in the first place? 2, how was this crime allowed to happen? To asking for the killing of the man, which no doubt in the short term provides a sense of closure by killing the criminal and not the crime. Dear brothers, before I leave, I would just like to ask 3 questions to Bharatas. 1, given the intrinsic flaws of capital punishment and its futile endeavors in deterring crime, do you still recommend it? 2, given its short-term appeasement of the need for justice, are you willing to sacrifice the long-term interests? 3, under what circumstances is it moral for a society to do that which a member of that very society cannot do alone? I'll repeat this. Under what circumstances is it moral for a society to do that which a member of that very society cannot do alone? Hope we have got you thinking. Thank you.
Now I'll call Manav from the Bharata House to oppose the motion.
Offering our collective pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet, respected director, respected jury, respected teachers, and all my dear brothers. I quote, "The punishment of a crime by death," I unquote. Who said it? Said the Oxford Dictionary when we asked it to define the term capital punishment. And before I begin, statistics appreciated. While my worthy opponents were stating their views and opinions, I stood gaping at the father who lost his daughter on the streets of Delhi. I was listening to the sobs, silent sobs of that mother who lost her only son and was forced to make compromises with herself. And the most beautiful and coincidental part here is that we as a team, it's not by fate that we stand against the abolishment of capital punishment, but it is by personal opinion too. Esteemed jury, before I begin, I would like to state that it must not be interpreted that we are sadistic in our approach towards capital punishment and that we are advocating capital punishment. We are here to question that isn't capital punishment necessary for horrific crimes like genocide, physical assault, terrorism, etc. And these crimes, They just go against the principles of morality and humanity. And I firmly believe that I think both the teams need to keep in mind the spirit of capital punishment before we even move on the debate. And it's important to note that it is only a limited category of serious offenders who are visited by capital punishment after undergoing a legal and lawful process. At this juncture, allow me to quote a wise judge who says that modern constitutionalism points that no wielder of power should be allowed to claim the right to perpetrate state's violence against anyone, much less its own citizens, unchecked by law and notions of innate human dignity of every individual, I am quote. To clarify it further to our dearest opponents, we accept that it does not, we wholeheartedly accept that it does not act as a deterrent, but it does stand not only a sense of justice in its true form, but also a sense of safety. And my dear jury, I think it's very imperative to note the support the family of the victims and the victim need in times of pain and sorrow, wounds and pains which can never ever be healed or erased. Such a process cannot at all be termed as vengeance, firstly, because, or any other synonym which the opponents are looking at. In fact, our courts have become so compassionate nowadays that the convicts are given enough and ample time to prove themselves before the court of law. And we firmly believe that instant justice is surely revenge. Delayed justice is denial, and justice at a reasonable pace is true justice. I would also like to point out that capital punishment is not given to any Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street. It is only given, it is only and only depends on the degree of crime committed, and nothing else at all. Respected jury and my dearest audience, I don't think tears were enough for the families of the victims who were shot brutally at the Taj in Mumbai. And if events like these are happening at this passing second, at this debating second, and if these things cannot move your heart, cannot melt your heart, I don't know what on earth can. And that is why we as a team stand united against the abolishment of capital punishment. For his existence on the streets out there may be a concern for potential risk. A risk humanity can definitely not afford to take. Thank you.
Nikhilesh Pandey of the Arjuna House supports the motion.
But the opponents, first of all, I would like to tell you that questions which you asked, answer for that was already given by Govinda, but further it will be elaborated by my teammates. And if you say that innocent people are not given death penalty, let me start my talk and you'll get to know. So at this juncture, it is incumbent on our team to emphasize that the abolition of death penalty does not involve the release of the offender without any punishment whatsoever. We say that a suitable alternative to death penalty is life imprisonment without parole. That is the highest form of punishment except death. Legal theories of capital punishment describe retribution and deterrence as two distinct ways to justify the punishment. Retribution is severe punishment inflicted as revenge, and deterrence is to prevent crime. The Supreme Court has strongly disapproved the revenge-based approach of retribution. In Dina versus Union of India, the court ruled that the retribution involved in the theory tooth for tooth and an eye for an eye has no place in the scheme of civilized jurisprudence. We had our Justice S.A. Bobde highlighting that revenge is a kind of wild justice. And what the opponents are calling for is exactly this kind of punishment which serves no definite aim other than revenge. Yes, public opinion indeed is a factor to be considered while making important decisions. However, the government has a duty to drive public opinions towards factors which support fairness, dignity, and justice, which are constitutionally enshrined ideals. There are historical examples where laws, policies, and practices that were inconsistent with the human rights standards had the support of majority of the audience. But it was proven wrong and eventually abolished or banned. The Indian experience of such progressive laws governing social issues such as dowry, sati, untouchability, and child marriage is testament to the fact the government has the power to lead public opinion even against deeply entrenched cultural norms, and indeed an obligation to do so when faced with issues concerning human dignity and equality. Take the example of France. France abolished death penalty in 1981, despite public opinion to the contrary. But 10-15 years later, a majority of the population found that the capital punishment did not make any difference to the murders committed in the country. A democracy is about what a people want, no doubt. But a state that believes in its moral code is also about what its enlightened reformers from Ashoka to Ambedkar have wanted it to be. And we need to consider that fact. And what about country's public opinion? Can that too not be flawed? Disturbingly, a large body of evidence from the modern era shows that innocent people have been convicted and executed. For example, since 1900 in the US, there have been on an average more than 4 cases each year when an entirely innocent man was executed. For that matter, we don't know how many innocent people are being executed in China because such numbers are state secret. And still you feel that innocent people are not convicted. Sorry, brother, you are not right. These incidents are happening. Now, you might argue that today's technology and forensic methods render it really near impossible to convict an innocent man. However, experiences the world over, including in India, suggest that all it takes is just one dishonest police officer, one incompetent lawyer, one corrupt prosecutor, or one mistake in the witness, and the entire criminal system fails. Therefore, the death penalty remains an irreversible punishment in an imperfect and fragile system. To show you a picture of reality, on 1st July 2012, 14 former judges wrote to the President of India, pointing out that 13 people have been sentenced wrongly to death. 2 of them were already executed. Supreme Court was too late to admit its error. This is human life we are talking about. Men are not lab rats to be experimented upon by judicial system, because then you denigrate the human life to a new low. Thank you.
Bibu Prada Acharya of the Bharata House opposes the motion.
Sairam, dearest Bhagwan, respected director sir, esteemed jury, respected chair, teachers and dear brothers. Sairam to one and all present here. The opposition talks a lot about right to life. And if I am permitted to put their arguments in one sentence, it would be this: that no matter how horrible or horrific, brutal or barbaric the crime is, the criminal is entitled to his right to life. Well, I say one thing. Brother Govinda just now said that 140 countries have actually abolished capital punishment, and this right to life is the premise of their abolition, and the front runners of this being Britain and France. Well, let me tell something else. On 26th of October 2019, al-Baghdadi, the infamous IS terrorist, was killed by US military strikes. And this is what Mr. Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, says. The death of Baghdadi is an important moment in our fight against terror. Death of Baghdadi? Like you are celebrating the death of Baghdadi. What happened to the right to life of Baghdadi? Did Baghdadi have no I think this country feels that for the crimes that Baghdadi had committed, he deserves death. Take the case of Saddam Hussein, for instance. There were so many countries which came and supported US, gave military support. That included Netherlands, Germany and Denmark. And these are the nations who have actually abolished capital punishment. But even they felt that the nature of crime Saddam Hussein deserves death. When I asked them, what's wrong? if a heinous criminal such as Saddam Hussein and Baghdadi is executed after undergoing a fair trial, does the heinousness of the crime decreases just because the guy is behind the bars? No, it doesn't. A punishment should be proportionate to the crime that you commit, and capital punishment aims to do just that. And let me tell you, we don't advocate capital punishment for anything and everything, and we clearly say that it is not a deterrent. We accepted that it is not a deterrent, but we will say one thing: capital punishment is justice. It is justice because the crime that you commit is so heinous in nature, and we'll spell it out what we mean by heinous. Heinous crimes means for us genocide, terrorism, brutal assault against women, brutal assault against children. What happened to Nirbhaya in the streets of Delhi? Was that not brutal enough to melt your hearts? What happened to the victim of the Unnao assault? Was that not heinous enough to melt your heart? And suppose we abolish capital punishment, it's tantamount to equating these crimes to the level of the less heinous crimes. And I think that is just not just. There might be some concerns that capital punishment might be misused. Now, how do my opponents feel that they will be able to abolish capital punishment? By putting international pressure, right? By passing an UN resolution. Then do that to have a moratorium on the capital punishment, decrease the number of cases for which you can give capital punishment. We don't advocate capital punishment for each and every crime, but we say for heinous crimes such as that of Nirbhaya, that of Unnao, that of Ajmal Kasab, who shattered 150 lives in one single day, we say capital punishment is just the answer. And suppose you think that is impractical, putting international pressure is impractical, then the essence of this debate lies not questioning the methodologies, not questioning the form, questioning the spirit of capital punishment. We support this spirit. It's common question that will answer to it. Thank you.
Sai Sriram of the Arjuna House supports the motion.
Stand up to all. First of all, I would like to excuse myself and ask the opposition, why are you putting words in our mouth? Not once did we raise the issue of right to life, not once did we mention Article 14, Article 21, Article 19, not once. Because we know the debate stretches way beyond that. First of all, I would like to address this point, drive home this point that it is not only the victim who is a loved one, the criminal also has a family. Okay, but it's also a fact that the criminal is a loved one for his family. But since you sympathize only with the victim, let me try to put you on the other side. Now, pardon me when I say this, but let's say for some reason, whatever reason, your mother or your father or your brother or your sister or your relative or your loved one actually went and committed a crime. Now tell me, for all your pro-death penalty views, will you or will you not fight to save your mother, your father, your brother, your sister and your loved one? One of the primary reasons why capital punishment is promoted by its supporters is the claim that it acts as a deterrent to crime. Now, after many years of research and debate, a worldwide consensus has now emerged that capital punishment and deterrence have no correlation whatsoever. Innumerable studies, such as the ones conducted by the Death Penalty Information Center, by the Committee on Deterrence in 2012, by the UK Royal Commission in 1953, the Myth of Deterrence by Karen and Wood in 2014, have all proven this fact. Even the United Nations agrees that it is nothing more than a myth. To understand the reason as to why capital punishment does not deter crime, these studies point out that we ought to look at the origins of crime itself. Let's take an example to understand this better. Say, we have a person named John, an unemployed youth with a poor socio-economic background, who's walking down a dimly lit road and he sees an old man carrying a big bag. Presuming that the bag might contain hard cash or valuables, he instantly decides to attack. Now listen carefully. Put yourself in the place of John. When you decide to attack, you are not thinking about how severe the punishment for attacking is. You are not thinking about how much jail time you will serve, how much capital punishment you will get. You are thinking only about how to run away from the crime scene, how to commit a crime and run away. It's like this. A bad example to quote in our system, I agree, but it drives home the point. Suppose, say, you want to cheat in the exam. Now, while trying to cheat, you wouldn't be thinking about how severe the punishment for cheating is. You wouldn't be thinking about how much time you will get to be debarred from every other exam. What you will be thinking about is the method of escape. That's why whenever the invigilator comes to you, or turns away from you, you take out the paper sheet from wherever and you decide to copy. Now, in case John was committing a crime of passion like an assault, he is driven solely by his instincts and his impulses, and he suspends all rational thought. He would do anything it takes to stop people from detecting that he did the crime, which even entails that he would beat the victim beyond recognition. Or, that's why even in the recent assault cases, the bodies were burnt and hidden, right? That explains it. Therefore, John, before attacking the old man, wasn't like, man, I seriously want to attack this guy, but the death penalty, what a deterrent. He wasn't thinking that way. Therefore, by vigorously calling for capital punishment, you are not addressing the main point. You are thinking about what the criminal is not going to think during his crime. Instead, it would be better to focus on increasing the probability of detecting the criminal, such as more police officers on the road, better CCTV surveillance, and faster response rates. It's about keeping more invigilators in the exam hall. All these help deter the criminal from committing the crime in the first place. If you talk about the need for executing a terrorist, you have to understand that the terrorist is working in the name of an ideology that honors its martyrs. In fact, you would be happy to be awarded the death penalty, because by awarding him the death penalty, you are going to inspire 100 more minds to follow the same path that he followed. What I'm trying to say is that deterrence and the death penalty are two parallel lines that are never ever going to meet. Euphemistically put, the statistics prove inconclusive. Why do you want to risk a decision when you cannot see the entire picture? Why do you want to step into the river when you don't know just how deep the water is? Especially when human life is the subject under consideration. Thank you.
Archit Tiwari from the Dwarka House. Opposite to motion.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Respected director, members of the jury, and respected chair. First of all, I would like to state it for the third time from our house that its capital punishment is not acting as a deterrent. We have already stated it twice, and again we are stating it that it is not acting as a deterrent, and we want capital punishment to remain in our statute books just for the sake of justice and threat to the society. Next, when you talk about hypothetical situation like John cheating, how can you compare it to something like crime against women? And when you talk about the right to life for the convict, the rights of the convict, you should also take in consideration that the court also checks the circumstantial evidence that is put forth on behalf of the lawyer of convict. So there is all consideration taken care by the judiciary before giving death penalty. For that matter, consider that capital punishment is abolished and removed from our statute books. The initial course of action on criminals would be that of reform, rehab. My abolitionist brothers here would suggest that irrespective of the crime you commit, every convict, every criminal can be reformed. Maybe so, but I am reminded of Usman Khan from London. Usman Khan was convicted for plotting an attack on London Stock Exchange in 2012. The judge who convicted him feared that if left free into the society, he is a potential danger, a threat to the society. But he was later released on a parole in December 2018. What he did next? Last month, by attending a prisoners rehabilitation conference, he went on a stabbing spree, killing 2 people and attacking many others. So where is your reform? Who declares, who certifies that a prisoner, a convict is reformed and is ready to get back into the society? Even the best of the psychiatrists have failed in this exercise. Let me introduce Mr. Masood Azhar. Masood Azhar, arrested and imprisoned in Tihar jail, influenced his fellow terrorists in Pakistan to hijack an Indian Airlines flight to Afghanistan. And what happened next? He was released in exchange of the 155 passengers on board. So, prolonged imprisonment doesn't look like an answer for such dangerous convicts. Even in the recent Unnao assault case, the two accused were released on bail. Within few days of their release, they set ablaze the 23-year-old victim when she was going to file her statement in the court. Such an act is not only inhuman and barbaric, but also cowardly. Here the convict deserved nothing less but capital punishment. The 26-year-old Mumbai attacker Arjun Kasab, who was executed in 2013 for killing more than 160 innocents, was given a fair trial, a chance to represent. He was provided with best of the lawyers in the country, and his case was heard in the early morning hours at 3 a.m. on the day of his execution. So you cannot just say that judiciary is not helping the convict. It is giving all the fair chance to prove your point, to keep your point of view in front of the bench. Capital punishment should remain not only for the reasons of reform, rehab and its failures, but as the ultimate punishment for crimes against humanity. Yes, we agree that there are systemic flaws which needs to be corrected and considered as soon as possible. But abolition of capital punishment don't solve these flaws. Capital punishment should remain in its principle for the paramount need of maintaining law and order and providing justice to the victim. Thus, it is neither advisable nor desirable to abolish capital punishment. Thank you.
I request of the Arjuna House support the motion.
To all. Dear opponents, what we are saying is that the judicial system for death penalty is unclear. The way the death penalty is imposed the world over is through a process of litigations, appeals, counter-appeals, and sometimes involves the executive arm of that nation. Again, for better understanding, let's take India. The organ of judiciary follows the Reyes of the Ray doctrine, which surfaced in the Bachchan Singh versus Union of India, 1980, to impose the death penalty. After which, the executive organ represented by the president takes the final call. But now, judges, chief justices, prime ministers, and presidents are not made in heaven's perfection, but they are made of the same decoction of misunderstanding and understanding. The Supreme Court admitted in Ghaffar versus State of Maharashtra that the subjective and freakish imposition of capital punishment haunts its jurisprudence in India. What does that mean? That Reyes of the Ray is nothing but legal fiction. A case which is Reyes of the Ray for one judge may not be the Reyes of the Ray for the other. This subjectivity and judge-centric approach has proved fatal for a long time now, and the Supreme Court confesses. Coming to the executive organ, that is the President, Mr. K.R. Narayanan, Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam, and Ms. Pratima Patil accepted mercy petitions, but Mr. Pranab Mukherjee did not. The Rashtrapati Bhavan has continuously played like a pendulum. This fuzzy picture of presidential decisions shows the active influence of the government in power. Politicians, being vote maximizers, use the president as a tool to communicate their stance on crime. Party ideologies and wishes determine whether the president declare a man die or not. In every situation of public affair, the state is God's deputy, but in its right to kill, the state is God itself. Over the years, there has been substantial evidence to show that the application of death penalty is racially and economically discriminatory. In the US since 1976, the odds of receiving a death sentence are nearly 4 times higher if the criminal is black than if he or she is white. Public interest laws in the US concede that capital punishment is a lottery. It's a punishment shaped by the constraints of poverty, race, and local politics. In India, studies have shown that 2/3 of the death sentences have been granted to economically backward, religious minorities and marginalized backward communities. Justice P. N. Bhavati, in whose honor a gold medal is instituted in our convocation, said, and I quote, "The death penalty has a certain class and complexion bias because it's largely the poor and downtrodden who are the victims of this extreme penalty. We would hardly find a rich or affluent person being executed. That way, it's a privilege of the poor." This discrimination also adds to the arbitrary and inconsistent nature of the death penalty. Being that the economically weak are not able to fight for the sentence, given their inability to hire strong legal counsel, a glaring 97% say they can't. But people who are wealthy can move heaven and earth to see that they walk away free. Whether one ends up in death row is usually not determined by the heinousness of the crime, but by the quality of the judge and the legal counsel he hires. Is the accused to live or die depending on the way the court benches are constituted from time to time? And what to talk about the duration of these trials and associated costs? These costs include litigation costs, costs of judges, prosecutors, public defenders, court reporters, security in court. But we believe what's more important for a court is not money, but its equivalent, time. Take India. Our judicial system is already over-leveraged in terms of cases. Therefore, faster justice will only remain a dream of dreams. Now with this, we take death penalty, whose median on average duration is 8 years, 12 years, or even goes to 21 years. Remember, when you execute a man who's been in a death row for 8 years or 20 years, you're not executing the same person who came in. If you want justice to remain just and unbiased, if you want justice to be accessible to all, irrespective of which society or class of society one comes from, if you want justice to be delivered fast and believe justice delayed is justice denied, then just do one thing: abolish capital punishment. Thank you.
Raja Mahuja of the Baroda House supported the motion.
For the past 30 minutes, our opponents have very eloquently expounded about why capital punishment should be abolished, and they have kept on referring to one point, and that is the question of morality, ethics, and justice. And it is my hope that I will be able to take on their points one by one. So let us tackle the bull by its horns and delve right into the question of morality and justice. Say you're diagnosed with gangrene, which is a highly infectious skin condition, on your arm, and you visit the doctor, and he tells you to chop that arm off to protect the rest of your body. Now, would you consider this procedure of chopping your arm off a necessity for the greater good, or would you consider it immoral? Similarly, capital punishment is not an ideal situation, but it is a necessity for the greater good. You have to remove a few poisonous elements from the society to save the society at large from risk of harm. That is morality. The opposition talked about one incompetent lawyer, which would result in an innocent life. I will talk about one unreformed criminal like Osman Khan, which would result in the loss of hundreds of lives. By poisonous elements, I mean only the rarest of the rare crimes. Crimes in which human dignity itself is violated. Genocide, terrorism, and crimes against humanity. As hard as it might be, let us recall the 2012 Nirbhaya episode and think about it for a moment. Even if she had survived, would her life have ever been the same again? She had suffered severe emotional, physical, and mental trauma, and her very dignity had been compromised. After committing such diabolical crimes, would it be moral or ethical for these criminals to live on the very money of the taxpayers whose lives they have destroyed? Brother Achut Khare has already mentioned that 28 crores of taxpayers' money was spent in the legal representation, food, and shelter of Ajmal Kasab. Is that morality? One question that seems to bother our opponents is this: if we have not given them their lives, then who are we to snatch it from them? But I say that we have given them their lives. The farmer who's working hard in the field, the tailor who's stitching their clothes, the worker who's built their homes, the doctor who's keeping them, the vendor who's selling them. The society has given them their lives, and if they have no respect for the society, but are actively against the society, then the society has a right to take and only after a fair trial in a court of law. Two, it is true that many countries of the European Union have abolished capital punishment and they make a huge hue and cry, like our opponents do, about issues related to morality. But aren't these very countries of United Kingdom, France and Germany cooperating with the United States to fight the war on terrorism in the Middle East? You want statistics? Let me give you a statistic. NATO had 33,000 soldiers posted in the Middle East in 2006 alone. Year after year, they proudly declare the statistics on the thousands of terrorists they kill every year. But this question of morality and justice does not seem to arise then. You are talking about the 1970s, about how our justice system was very subjective in the 1970s. Let us talk about the recent past. The last 3 people who were given capital punishment in India, Ajmal Kasab, Yaqub Memon and Afzal Guru, were convicted terrorists who were collectively responsible for hundreds of Indian lives. But the European Union has a problem with that. So it seems to me that whatever is politically correct and whatever garners clout in the international arena automatically becomes moral. Isn't that subjective? We have said it before, in fact we have said it 3 times and I will mention it to you for the 4th time. Capital punishment is not a deterrent, it is merely an instrument to provide justice and security. And finally the question that looms large, even if the worst of crimes have been committed, who are we to mete out justice? Who are we to take someone's life? Does that not bring us down to their level? The opponents here are basically questioning the very existence of the entire judicial system and the foundations of modern human society. The fact of the matter is, society runs according to some laws, and that law must thus provide for capital punishment for those who not only have no respect for it, but actively go against it. That is justice. That little bit of comfort and consolation that was provided to Nirbhaya's parents after her molesters were convicted of capital punishment for molesting their innocent daughter, that is justice. The reward or the punishment being in accordance and in proportion to the action that you have taken, that is justice. Thank you.
Lawrence Aditya of the Alvida House, the last speaker from the Alvida House, is supposed to make.
If you say every murderer needs to be killed, then why haven't you killed the many involved in the mass killings of Mumbai 1993, Delhi 1984, Gujarat 2002, and what about mob lynchers? Does murdering in a group absolve you of all guilt? If you say people cannot be reformed, in this institution, we are led by someone who believed in transformation. What is going to stem crime is to do a root cause analysis as to why crime emanates and go to those fundamentals of investigation rather than finding a shorthand script to end a particular case and quench the bloodlust of people. When you say that let's kill them, we want safety in society, the very point we say it's not acting as a deterrent. How will people be safe? People have been executed from when? 1800s. Are murders stopping to happen? Are assaults stopping to happen? Nothing. Just listen. I'm sure no one in this hall has ever murdered or committed a crime, right? Raise your hand if you committed some murder or crime. Yeah, you? No, you don't have. Nobody does because we are educated. We are socially fulfilled. We have fulfilled our social needs. But, quoting Justice Bhagwati again, he said, today's death sentences are imposed on those people who are hardened by society's neglect and are pushed to the bylanes. It is a privilege of the poor. Capital punishment is nothing but an lottery, I unquote. I had this wonderful opportunity of talking with Mr. Dr. R.K. Seren, Director of Forensic Sciences and Crime Investigation, Government of Andhra Pradesh, where he just started by saying death penalty is rubbish. I'll tell you why. He said what we need is not capital punishment but human asset theory in criminology. What is the human asset theory? It looks to convince people that when they act in acts of hard labor and repentance in prison, they will do something like washing clothes or cutting the vegetables. And the handlooms or handicrafts and the various biscuits they make are sold outside and the money does not come back to the prison. It goes to those families of those prisoners who are fighting for their welfare. So I think human asset theory, and what they're saying is don't release him or don't put him in society. They're saying put him in prison. Put him for 23 hours, it's already self-confinement. Do everything it takes to put him inside. Don't release him. Treat him like the poorest of the poorest treated in society. Don't give him food. Give him food how much is required. But don't release him. Don't kill him. Don't kill him. Because once you kill him, who are you? You're going to lose an asset. You're going to lose a human being who can do work for you and help his family on the outside indirectly. Am I right or not? Agree. This is the Law Commission of India, report on death penalty, August 2015. Sadananda Gowda was the Law Minister, prepared at the request of the Supreme Court to provide information, informed discussion and debate on the subject. If you go to the last chapter, recommendations. The march of our own jurisprudence from requiring special reasons for imposing the death penalty in 1973 to 1980 when the death penalty was restricted by the Supreme Court to the rarest of rare cases shows the direction in which we have to head. The Commission now feels that the time has come for India, like the rest of the world, to move towards complete abolition of the death penalty. What I am trying to say is, you have people like Amartya Sen saying death penalty is not the answer because it is more irreversible in its effects and faulty. Abdul Kalam said all cases of capital punishment have a social and economic bias. While the father of the Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar said the proper thing for this country and the world to do is abolish the death penalty altogether. Why even the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, you might have heard only an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. He said in Harijan magazine, the death sentence is contrary to ahimsa. Only he who takes life gives it. Again, I'll come back to Swami here. In the Treta Yuga, put them back in two different countries. You could identify and kill. In the Dwapara Yuga, they were in two different kingdoms. You could send a missile and shoot them all. In the Kali Yuga, they were the same person. When you kill a man, you don't know what you are executing him, the good or the bad. And that is why he has come for the purpose of transformation. And you keep telling, you cannot reform, you cannot reform. Why the hell can't you reform? Transformation is why he is here for. And that is what we believe in, because capital punishment is nothing but annihilation, destruction. But removing, including human asset theory, including rehabilitation and others, is what transformation is. Look at Norway. They abolished capital punishment 20 years ago. And today they are one. They have revamped their entire criminal justice system. Today, they are number one country in Human Development Index and the world's happiest country, standing third and second respectively in the last 2 years. When we as a country who chose different approach to have freedom, when we as a country who embraced a great empire with a smile on our face, when we have done those things, why not do this, which has got to be done sooner or later? Because it is largely overdue. And when we do this, we will realize that capital punishment is consigned to history, a place where it belongs. You will truly understand by listening to the accounts of people. An eye for an eye. Can you complete it? An eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind. Be the Arjuna's Rashtra case.
The last speaker for the day is the Tamil Congress of the Dharka House opposing the motion.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Offering my most reverential pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Honorable Director, esteemed jury, revered chair, respected teachers, my dear brothers and worthy opponents. First things first, in this institution that we study, it also propagates that part of Hindi, fear of sin is required. Second thing, the quote that you quoted of Justice P.N. Bhagwati, it was from 1970, and doctrine of capital punishment has changed a lot by now. I feel that the last speaker of the opposition spoke very confidently, but what I feel is the basic problem here is the opposition did not hear the previous of our four speakers. It is rather strange, I must say, that there are crimes in our very own society that compel the entire mankind to ponder over one question. Is humanity and morality still in existence? It is for such cases capital punishment stands, not for revenge or vengeance as some people wrongly put it, but for justice for the heinous crimes that are committed. Our stand is not for eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. We stand for justice and justice alone. Normally when I speak, my heart rarely skips a beat. But today my legs are shivering. Not because of addressing an audience, but because of the emotions that overwhelm me. When the case regarding a brutal homicide of an 11-month-old baby came before the US Supreme Court, the case in which the homicide was committed in a manner that was beyond the realm of human imagination, the accused was duly convicted and sentenced. Believe me, the former Associate Justice of the US Supreme Court, Antonin Scalia, had tears in his eyes when he said this, and I quote, "I would not presume to tell parents whose lives have been forever altered by the brutal homicide of their child that life imprisonment is punishment enough." I unquote.
crimes capable of moving an entire nation to tears, crimes capable of putting an entire nation to shame. Right to life, something of which our opponents are so fond of, yet fail to grab the very essence of it. Why don't you see, by wielding such a powerful punishment as a response to such heinous crimes, the society is affirming the value that is placed upon the right to life of the innocent person. Now at this very moment, let us assume that it is possible to completely reform an abominable and a heartless convict who has been charged with serious crimes against humanity. The scenario representing the ideal case, with the worst case being the whole reformation strategy going futile. Knowing that it is impossible to judge the extent of reformation, my question here is, from the worst to ideal case, how much risk are we ready to take in between by leaving that person alive or possibly even setting him free? Usman Khan being one small example. Small, because what if the stakes are even higher? What if the person that we capture tomorrow is a living national threat himself? A person with an international influence? Even if such a person is placed in prison for the most gruesome and heinous crimes that he has committed, can the nation sleep in peace? Are we ready to put thousands of citizens at risk? One might say that it is an exceptional case, but don't you feel it is these exceptional cases that necessitate the existence of capital punishment in law? Society to live in. With this, we rest our case as we stand united against the abolishment of capital punishment.
That was a very, very closely contested debate. Big round of applause for both houses. Due to lack of time, we will not have a second round. A few words of what the chair believes. Man is intrinsically good. Therefore, if a human being, if a man commits a murder, see, later on in life, the goodness in him causes two things: guilt and horror. Horror of the whole thing that he has done. And that itself serves as a punishment. He undergoes the punishment throughout the life. That guilt and horror itself is a punishment that comes to him. And I do not think that capital punishment is justified. Instead of that, society should help such a man who is already suffering to come out and be a better human being. So, killing is not the solution. That's what I feel. And as the jury deliberates, we'll have bhajans.
Har Har Gange, Har Har Gange.
So the results are here. House A stands with 328 points in all, and House B stands at 339.5 points. The motion falls and Bharata House wins the debate. And I request our guest, Mr. Sriram, to offer Aarti to Bhagwan.
Om Jai Jagadish Hare, Swami Sathya Sai Hare, Bhakta Jana Sangha
नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा शांति 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 समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शांति 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 जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय।